I've built the world's smallest fully functional studio. So why did I build this? Well, there's kind of two reasons. One, I do a lot of product work, and two, I also wanted a way of demonstrating studio lighting techniques without having to rent an entire studio space. I can't film this with you on my lap. So my cat's joined me for this video. Hello. So, why would I build a model studio? Using a light box is a more traditional way of lighting products, where you have a translucent box essentially and you shine your lights in. This actually uses up a lot of space. Another thing is that I can also do things with this studio setup that you can't really do with a light box. For example, here I've built the turntable into the floor of the studio itself. I can paint the thing different colors if I need to. I could also, if I wanted to, add lighting effects like putting a small vignette on the background, or using gobos through a projection attachment. So this miniature studio setup gives me a few extra options when it comes to product video work. The second reason I wanted to build this is I want to put together a few different training videos on different lighting techniques, and it can be useful to have a scale model to show that off with. I could use 3D software, I could use lighting diagrams, but for me there's nothing quite like a practical model where you can move things very easily and quickly to demonstrate things. So how did I make it? Well, my woodworking skills are not the best. I basically made a wooden frame that I could then attach plywood to. And it was very important for me to find a way to have those infinity curves that you have in studio spaces, where you can light on white. The curve is such that it just looks like the shot goes on forever. To build those infinity walls, I basically found a kind of trim edging in the DIY shop that was perfect for putting in the corner, and then I used a little bit of filler to kind of smooth it round, almost like you would in a full-size studio, really. Because I'm filming things in miniature at small scale, I did a lot of sanding to try and make sure the surface was as smooth as possible, because any lumps and bumps would really show up a lot in miniature. I built the turntable into the floor of the studio. And for that I'm using a Syrup Genie motorized turntable that I've had for years. But I figured it would be nice to build it into the floor of the studio, so when I'm doing product shots it's much tidier and neater, and there's no risk of the turntable itself really getting into shot. When it came to paint, I used the mattest white paint I could find, much like you would in a real studio space. You don't really want a shiny paint, unless you're doing something interesting with the floor, like for a game show, or those kind of studio-based Saturday night shows, often called shiny floor shows. All the on-set lights get reflected on the floor, and it just gives you that extra depth. In the same way that wetting the tarmac outside is always done for film shots at night, because you get that extra depth with all the lights reflected. But for my model, I'm keeping it matte for now so I can do white studio setups. I also built a lid for the studio. I wanted to be able to replicate those studios that have a full cove with a white ceiling as well, which are often used for car photography and video work. Now on to lighting. Now, I really wanted to be able to scale down my lighting to match the scale of the studio, so I could light in the same kind of way you would in a real studio space. For the kind of softboxes you tend to use in a studio, it was quite easy to scale things down. Things like Aputure AL-MC lights or camera top lights are already small, little, compact, soft lights, and as soon as you bring them into a miniature studio space, they'd be quite large soft lights in real life. So, for example, in this studio space, I was able to use the Aputure AL-MCs like they were large sky panels and use them to light the back wall. I was also able to use an Aputure P60, which is a small panel light. Again, at the studio scale, this would be an enormous soft light, like almost 12 foot by 8 maybe, but that gives me that lovely soft top-down lighting you can sometimes use in studio spaces. The thing I was stuck with is how to get the kind of small Fresnel lights and hard light sources that we often use. They don't really exist in the small scale. So I did a bit of research. I ended up finding these. Made by Smallrig. I think there's a few made by other manufacturers as well. And they are tiny little COB sources. And they're adorable. I got this as a kit of 3. They're not particularly controllable. You've got 3 dimming levels, And they come with little stands, they come with little magnet mounts for putting little barn doors on. You can't adjust the rotation, but you can turn the barn doors around to have them on different sides. And they come with accessories like a snoot. It comes with a little grid, which just helps control the beam angle. They also come with little light domes that make them act like little tiny space lights almost. And really, I'm quite surprised they are like little tiny COB sources. One thing I did find with these is the inside of the light isn't just a bare LED bulb. There's actually a tiny little reflection dish. So they're a little bit more like a COB light with its reflector attached. You don't get absolutely razor sharp cuts with barn doors, and you don't get razor sharp shadows. But that can be mitigated by using a little bit of black wrap in there and a tiny hole, just so you block off the reflector and you're just getting the hard light source from that LED array. But for me, these will be quite useful for doing miniature work and great for demonstrating things in the miniature studio space. And I think I'll be able to use them on some product shoots as well. Instead of using lots of large lights and taking lots of big things with me on location, I can take the studio, I can take the P60, I can take a few of these, I can bounce them off the inside of the white studio, and I can light with the P60 above as a lovely soft source. And I might be able to use the Aputure AL-MCs as well to light the back wall. And now I've got a miniature studio set up, which really simplifies going on location to do these kind of product shoots for me. Another thing I bought for the miniature studio are these adorable little tiny C-stands. I thought they'd be a bit of a novelty to begin with, but they actually could be super useful. I'm going to make some little scaled down black flags for them, and I might be able to actually use them anytime there's a unwanted reflection on a product I'm shooting. I can bring in the little mini C-stand and flag off whatever's causing the unwanted reflection. I'm really pleased with how my miniature studio turned out. It's going to be very useful for product shoots. Even though light boxes might be better a lot of the time, I feel like any time I've got a setup very quickly where I don't want to take a lot of lights, I'm going to use my miniature studio, and it's going to come in very useful for some later videos demonstrating different kind of lighting techniques.